Welcome to Immigration Briefing. The content of the briefing includes: higher immigration without business investment lowers Canadian living standards. 80 freed from immigration detention since landmark High Court ruling. Ministers must do what it takes to get the Rwanda plan off the ground. Border fight in Senate raises risks for passage of Ukraine aid. Donald Trump as U.S. president again would be the stuff of nightmares. Higher immigration without business investment lowers Canadian living standards. The Globe and Mail. Canada's weak business investment and falling stock of capital per worker are hindering the country's economic progress, according to a report from the C.D. Howe Institute. The report argues that the combination of increased immigration and decreased business investment is leading to a low productivity, low-wage economy. Business investment in Canada has been weak since 2014, with per-worker investment at least one-fifth below its late 2014 peak. The report suggests that high taxes, an uncertain natural resource environment, and a regulatory focus on residential investment are contributing to the problem. 80 freed from immigration detention since landmark High Court ruling. The Guardian. Australian Immigration Minister, Andrew Giles, has said 80 people have so far been released from detention by the Australian government following a High Court ruling stating that it is unlawful to detain those with no realistic prospect of deportation. Giles sought to allay community concern by stating that all 80 were on appropriate visa conditions including regular reporting. The Home Affairs Minister, Claire O'Neill, and Giles also said the government is considering other measures that may be appropriate to ensure community safety, but did not indicate what regulatory changes might be considered. Ministers must do what it takes to get the Rwanda plan off the ground. Telegraph. The UK's police are not enforcing the law and are involved in political decisions, according to Brendan O'Neill. Writing for The Telegraph, O'Neill argues that police chiefs feel comfortable criticizing ministers but are not subject to scrutiny or criticism themselves. O'Neill suggests that the law surrounding public order policing should be changed, as the current approach is not working. He also criticizes the legal basis of the UK's immigration system, which he describes as a thicket resulting from thousands of judicial rulings. O'Neill calls for ministers to address these issues and argues that their hands are tied by their own political positions. He concludes that if the police do not enforce the law should be changed, and that if human rights laws render immigration and border control notional, the UK should leave the European Convention. Border fight in Senate raises risks for passage of Ukraine aid. Yahoo! Bipartisan talks on a border security package are complicating work on an emergency spending package requested by the Biden administration, raising more questions about whether Congress will find a way to provide aid to Ukraine by the end of the year. Donald Trump as U.S. president again would be the stuff of nightmares. South China Morning Post. There is growing concern that Donald Trump may win a second term as U.S. president in 2024, with polls suggesting a rerun of the 2020 election between him and Joe Biden. Critics fear the consequences of Trump's return, citing his megalomania, erratic behavior, and pursuit of fact-free theater. Trump's track record, including 2 impeachments and 91 criminal charges, is seen as evidence of his unsuitability for high office. Nevertheless, he continues to attract the unquestioning support of a large and loyal army of followers and dominates media attention. Pakistan's expulsion order deepens the Afghan crisis. Financial Times. Pakistan's decision to deport undocumented Afghan migrants back to Afghanistan is exacerbating an already dire humanitarian crisis. Tens of thousands of Afghans have already been forced to leave, with many more expected to follow. Pakistan insists it is only targeting undocumented individuals, but many of those being deported were born and raised in Pakistan and have no ties to Afghanistan. The return of hundreds of thousands of Afghans worsens the country's already struggling economy and could lead to further instability in the region. The international community, including the West, must do more to support both the Afghan migrants and the countries hosting them. Trump's plans if he returns to the White House include deportation raids, tariffs and mass firings. Associated Press. Former President Donald Trump has outlined his policy goals if he were to win a second term in the 2024 presidential election. The plans, which are markedly different from those of current President Joe Biden, would represent a significant overhaul of the U.S. government. Trump's proposed policies cover a wide range of areas, from immigration and trade to foreign policy and transgender rights. Some of his ideas, such as dismantling the deep state and imposing tariffs on foreign goods, would likely face opposition from Congress or the courts, but Trump and his allies are putting together detailed policy books nonetheless. On the issue of immigration, Trump would direct Immigration and Customs Enforcement to carry out the largest domestic deportation operation in U.S. history, targeting people living legally in the country who have jihadist sympathies or anti-American and anti-Semitic views. He would also increase the number of troops and federal agents at the US-Mexico border and build more of the border wall, as well as reimpose his travel ban on 7 Muslim-majority countries and expand it to include other countries. Trump's plans regarding transgender rights include declaring that hospitals and healthcare providers offering gender-affirming care no longer meet federal health and safety standards and cutting funding to schools that have vaccine or mask mandates. In terms of trade, Trump would introduce tariffs on most foreign goods and push for Congress to pass a reciprocal trade act giving the president the authority to impose tariffs on any country that imposes them on the U.S. He would also phase out Chinese imports of essential goods and ban Chinese companies from owning U.S. infrastructure. Additionally, Trump has pledged to end the war between Ukraine and Russia, stand with Israel in its conflict with Hamas, and fundamentally re-evaluate NATO's purpose and mission. Vermont may be the face of a long-term U.S. labor shortage. New York Times. Vermont's aging population is putting pressure on the state's workforce. Over a fifth of Vermonters are aged 65 or older, and over 35% are aged 54 or older. The state has a smaller share of its residents in their prime working years than any other state. It is a problem that is only set to get worse, with America's baby boomer population getting older and younger generations not large enough to replace them. Immigration, which has helped other states bolster their workforces, has not been a significant factor in Vermont. Birth rates are also falling. What happens if the government loses on Rwanda? Q&A. Bloomberg. The UK Supreme Court will decide this week whether the government's plan to deport asylum seekers to Rwanda is lawful. The ruling will determine the fate of the Conservative Party's flagship immigration policy, which aims to deter migrants from crossing the English Channel in small boats. The government argues that the policy will put pressure on criminal gangs and smugglers, but critics argue that it violates the European Convention on Human Rights. If the court rules against the government, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's plan to stop the boats would be left in tatters. Dutch election candidates make migration a key campaign issue in the crowded Netherlands. The Independent. Candidates in the upcoming Dutch parliamentary elections are campaigning on pledges to tackle migration issues. The town of Ter Apel has become synonymous with the country's struggles to accommodate large numbers of asylum seekers. The town's reception center is overcrowded and locals complain of crime and public order problems blamed on migrants who wander in small groups through the village. Political parties are also pledging to crack down on labor migrants and foreign students, who now make up some 40% of university enrollments. Bodyguard sentenced to death over model's assassination is freed from Sydney jail. The Sydney Morning Herald. Cyril Azza Umar, a former Malaysian prime ministerial bodyguard sentenced to death over a politically charged murder in 2006, has been released from detention in Australia. He was held for almost 9 years, but was freed following a high court ruling that stated non-citizens who were unable to be deported could no longer be detained indefinitely. As a result, 92 people, mostly refugees but including some others found guilty of violent crimes, have been released and permitted to remain in Australia under special conditions. Biden campaign denounces racist, cruel alleged Trump immigration proposals. Yahoo! Former President Donald Trump is planning to implement a range of hardline immigration policies if he wins a second term, according to a New York Times report. The policies, which were reportedly drawn up by Trump advisor Stephen Miller, include rounding up millions of undocumented people and placing them in detention camps. Other proposals include denying automatic citizenship to babies born to undocumented people, and denying visas to individuals with ideological views that Trump dislikes. The proposals would rely on existing statutes, allowing Trump to act without needing help from Congress to overhaul immigration laws. Vicky's folks couldn't come to Australia for her wedding and immigration official didn't believe they would go home again. ABC. People from Myanmar are having difficulty obtaining visitor visas to Australia, with many applications being rejected on the assumption that applicants intend to apply for permanent protection visas. The rejection letters cite the political and economic situation in Myanmar as a reason why applicants would not want to return, despite evidence to the contrary. The rejection process is seen as arbitrary and unfair, with applicants feeling that their evidence is not being given proper consideration. Only a small number of people from Myanmar are applying for protection visas in Australia. Senator Manchin is the last in a line of formidable West Virginia Democrats who promoted coal interests. The Toronto Star. Joe Manchin's impending departure from the U.S. Senate marks the end of an era for West Virginia's conservative Democrats, who for decades held outsized influence in Washington. It's the latest sign of the party's steady decline in the state that often has paralleled the demise of Appalachian coal. Donald Trump plans to deport millions of undocumented migrants if he wins second term. Telegraph. Donald Trump is reportedly planning to implement aggressive immigration policies, including conducting raids to detain and deport undocumented migrants and reinstate the Title 42 ban on asylum applications. He also intends to block citizens from certain Muslim-majority countries from entering the U.S. The plans come as the country faces a surge of migrants crossing the southern border to escape violence, political unrest, and poverty. Trump would redeploy federal agents, deputize local police officers and National Guard soldiers, and build holding facilities near the Texas border to detain migrants. The policies are likely to face legal challenges but may receive support from a Republican majority in the Supreme Court. In today's news, we have a mix of stories covering immigration policies and their potential impact on various countries. First, we have a report from Canada, which highlights how increased immigration without sufficient business investment can lower living standards. This serves as a reminder that a balanced approach is crucial for sustainable economic growth. Moving on to Australia, we see that the country has released 80 people from immigration detention following a High Court ruling. While this decision aims to address concerns about the unlawful detention of individuals with no realistic prospect of deportation, the government is still considering additional measures to ensure community safety. In the UK, there is an ongoing debate about the country's immigration system and the role of the police. Critics argue that the police are not effectively enforcing the law and are involved in political decisions. This raises questions about the need for legal and structural changes to address these issues. Meanwhile, in the US, there is growing concern about the possibility of Donald Trump winning a second term as president in 2024. Critics fear the consequences of his return, citing his megalomania and erratic behavior. However, Trump maintains a loyal following and continues to dominate media attention. In Pakistan, the decision to deport undocumented Afghan migrants back to Afghanistan is worsening the humanitarian crisis in the region. The international community, including the West, needs to provide support to both the migrants and the host countries to mitigate the impact of this situation. Shifting our focus to Trump's future plans, we learn that if he were to win a second term, he has outlined a range of policies that would significantly overhaul the U.S. government. These policies cover various areas, including immigration, trade, foreign policy, and transgender rights. While some of these proposals may face opposition, they highlight the potential changes that could occur under a Trump administration. Moving on to Vermont, we see that the state is facing a labor shortage due to its aging population. With a declining birth rate and limited immigration, this issue is expected to worsen in the coming years. This serves as a reminder of the importance of addressing demographic challenges and finding innovative solutions to sustain a workforce. In the UK, the Supreme Court is set to decide on the legality of the government's plan to deport asylum seekers to Rwanda. The ruling will determine the fate of a key immigration policy aimed at deterring migrants from crossing the English Channel. This decision will have significant implications for the government's approach to immigration. In the Netherlands, migration has become a key campaign issue in the upcoming parliamentary elections. Candidates are pledging to address migration-related challenges, including the accommodation of asylum seekers and the regulation of labor migrants and foreign students. This highlights the importance of migration policies in political discourse. In Australia, a former Malaysian prime ministerial bodyguard sentenced to death has been released from detention. This follows a High Court ruling that non-citizens who cannot be deported cannot be detained indefinitely. While this ruling has broader implications, it raises questions about the treatment of non-citizens in detention. Lastly, we have news from the Biden campaign, which denounces alleged immigration proposals by Donald Trump as racist and cruel. These proposals include rounding up undocumented individuals and placing them in detention camps, as well as denying automatic citizenship to babies born to undocumented people. This highlights the ongoing debate over immigration policies in the U.S. In conclusion, today's news brings to light the complexities and challenges surrounding immigration policies in various countries. It underscores the need for a balanced and comprehensive approach that takes into account economic, social, and humanitarian factors. As always, I'm eager to hear your thoughts on these issues. What are your ideas and perspectives on immigration policies and their impact? Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.